Good afternoon, good morning, good evening. Sandra Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. It's my amazing guest, Mr. Anthony Rose. How are you, Anthony?
I'm very well, thank you.
Good to see you.
Likewise.
So, how's it going in the legal profession these days? Is it going well?
Although we do, our platform builds the legals for funding rounds, we don't really think of ourselves in the legal profession. I like to, and it sounds a bit weird, but I like to think of ourselves in the solutions business. You've got a problem, you want to find investors, you want to close a round, you want to hire people. We provide the solution, and the legal documents are a part of that. But actually, what's really interesting is the computer just builds all the legals. What people really need help with is what I need to do next. Give me some data. Am I the only schmuck in the universe offering a liquidation preference share? Or does everyone want a liquidation preference share? My investor wants a seat on the board. What should I do? So in fact, it's data and advice and tutorials that are the key. I think I shouldn't say value add. The value add is the 100 pages of documents that underpin your round. That actually what people are looking for is just help me on that.
Yeah, it's a complex area, isn't it? I think we'll get into it, I suppose, in a second. But I suppose I was just thinking before we came on today's show was that I think if I came back in my next life, I would try and come back as a lawyer. Actually, I don't know if that's a good strategy, but I just think about all the times when they bring that kind of that peace of mind and that kind of that intellect and that kind of looking at something from a purely objective point of view. I suppose what you managed to do with what you've been doing over the recent time. I know you've got another backstory, but it's interesting. It's really helping people who've got great ideas make sure they do the right thing in terms of setting it up properly. Is that kind of how you describe it?
Yes. And by the way, as coming back as a lawyer, the one part of me would say, don't do that. It's a terrible idea. Technology is going to change that. But the other part actually says, lawyers are smart. And whenever technology comes along, smart people look to embrace that. So once upon a time, lawyers wrote contracts on parchment with quill pens, and then fountain pens, and then roller point pens. And then Microsoft Word was invented, and then G-Sheets. So you're constantly looking to use the tools that are available. So as a lawyer, why spend 3 days messing around in Microsoft Word, formatting, clause references when the computer does that in literally 100 milliseconds? So as the lawyer, you should then be looking to leverage that, in my view, to change the way that you operate your business. On SeedLegals, people use web chat, and our median response time is something like 3 minutes. So people see our platform as an always-on, man or person plus machine interface, and you just expect that, in the evenings, it's there to solve problems. So the days of operating as a lawyer, 9 to 5, book a call with me next week, John will get on the phone with you and charge you a few £100 an hour, that has to be changing. So on the flip side, we have a growing number of ex-lawyers, applying to SeedLegals to join us because they don't want to be. Okay. Yeah, they don't like law firms and the hierarchy and way of working, but they love the law that would like to be in the product development. So why do something 1,000 times when you could put effort into building it once and the computer replicates it thousands of times?
It's really interesting because I was reading a book recently that this thing about the origins of Uber, the origins of Airbnb. It's like the problem, like your example of web chat. You just wouldn't historically. You would not get that level of service. That even that timeline of service. It just was just unheard of. So you kind of collapse the timeline, and you've made it very, very. I suppose it's self-serving as well. You can actually research the information. You can you can read around the topic before you actually have an interaction with the person as well. Is that right?
Exactly. But one of the things I love to do is I love to think, what would a law firm do? And then do exactly the opposite. So what I do is the law firm would charge you the same to do the same again and again. What we'll do is put unbounded CapEx into solving a problem and make it a scalable one-click solution. So, and then we look to use technology to constantly put ourselves out of business, so to speak. Right. So the platform will build documents, but people have questions. So can we write an article? Can the chatbot AI software start recommending articles. I'm not a big fan of automated chatbots because they're just generally terrible, but there's nothing wrong with using automation so that it can pick up keywords and recommend articles. It could be a video. It could be a video of me talking about liquidation preference. So actually,
I know you're good. I know you're good on video. Yeah, I've seen a few webinars of you. I know you're good. You're good.
Thanks.
You like you. So you know the thing about the chatbots. It's a bit like is it like the Wizard of Oz? With like the guy behind the curtain. It's like somebody's like typing away like this.
Well, that's right. But I think in the future, you might find we're experimenting now with the technology that links short video clips, maybe of me or maybe of others in my team, to typewritten questions. So it could be almost like there is an Anthony there.
Yeah.
Scalable. I can create a scalable.
You got to have an Antbot. There you go.
Antbot, yeah. We call him Lawrence. So
okay.
Sometimes customers thank Lawrence for being really helpful, which is very sweet. So yeah,
that's cool. But I mean, if you explain, a little bit about your story. I mean, you have a technology background, don't you? I mean, is that right? You're not a lawyer by background.
Exactly. I'm not the lawyer guy. I'm the tech guy. So my background years ago was electronics, and then music, file sharing, and then BBC iPlayer. I headed up, and then after the BBC, I built a startup, sold it, invested in a few, got tired of paying lawyers, met my business partner, Laurent Laffy, who's a genius ex-VC and serial angel investor. And we got together and decided, let's change that. So we built SeedLegals. But I think one of the interesting things is when I see founders, I think founders need to fill 3 roles in a startup, which is number one, the domain expert. It might be the doctor with dialysis, or the person, the athlete who wants the better
seen the problem.
Exactly, and understands the audience. The second one is the person who's going to deliver it. That might be the CTO or product person. And the third one is the Mr. or Ms. Money, the person who's going to help get it funded, make sure that the business makes money and just doesn't, hemorrhage money month after month. And that's sort of the COO, CFO type role. And so when you as a founder look within and see which one or more of these might be you. So in our business, I'm more of the tech middle role. I can do a bit of the money thing because I've been around for a while, but it's less a passion for me. And my business partner is definitely the domain expert. For me, that was a learned experience. So then I think between the two of us, and of course our team around that, fills out, I think, those roles. And I think that's a key thing when founders say, do I need a co-founder? Or, think about which of these 3 roles do you fill yourself, and then look to complement those with one or more people, typically one, that will fill the others.
Okay. So one of the things it's interesting that. So it kind of reminds me of the, Mike Southern's book, the Beer Mat Entrepreneur. Yeah, with the kind of the foil and the different roles and the kind of the 4 corners of the beer mat. But you kind of had a triangular beer mat, I suppose. You said it was 3 core roles. Is that right?
What was the 4th one that he had?
I know you'd ask me that. Well, I think it's probably this probably because of the thing. I think Mike's background was more around sales.
I was about to say sales and marketing.
Probably the sales and marketing, the commercial side of it. So how do you? Obviously, depending on which market you're in, if it's B2C or B2B, I suppose it does vary from that point of view. So.
Sure. I think, that's a great point. I think initially the founders are the marketing people. I mean, one of the key things as a founder that you need to market or sell to are investors. You're not going to get investors before you've sold your vision to them. And then, it's just 2 people or whatever in the business, you're going to start selling that to your first users. So the founders are always out there marketing or selling, pitching. But you transition from pitching, as I did personally when starting SeedLegals, on a beanbag in the corridor outside our burgeoning office.
Really? Okay.
On Skype calls in the days when people used Skype, which was not that many years ago. And then eventually you start going, well, this isn't scalable, and you hire people who do that. And then you find that you start interacting less with individual users or customers and more on a sort of, I'd like to say, presidential level, although these days that's a tarred word. But yes,
I mean,
but then I think,
but I think with what you do is that what I'm honest with you is because you are. I mean, obviously, you're the CEO of SeedLegals, so you are the ambassador. What I see is you're very visible. You embody the personality of the company. You're out there talking about the topic, and I think one of the things I find fascinating with the stuff you do is that with the webinar you had the other week, is the advice. I was smiling when you were talking because the advice you were giving was absolutely spot on. It was like you were speaking like an accountant and a lawyer and a founder at the same time. It was like, I can tell Anthony has trod that path. When you go to talk to an accountant, you go, "Oh, I can't help you on that." You got to talk to a lawyer. You go to the lawyer, you go, "Oh, you got to talk to an accountant." Then you go back, "No, you got to talk to a tax guy." it's like
and that's
the
why
Bermuda Triangle.
Right, and that's why my slightly sort of throwaway line of, we're in the solutions business, because actually that is a real problem. When you talk to a lawyer, they'll often tell you the 12 things you could do with a risk assessment on each of them, which leaves you no wiser. In fact, it leaves you deeply troubled. And our goal is to go, listen, there are a range of solutions. We've looked at them, but actually 99% of the time, someone in your position does X. And so X is probably the way to go. And to give you the solution. And then people can also, or should be able to trust that this is a well-tested solution. By the way, just on the fourth pillar on the marketing person, I think ultimately, for sure, the business needs a marketing person and team. The question is that part of the founding team? Because I think the marketing role evolves. And I think if you found that unless you're a marketing agency, it's unlikely that one of the initial founder roles will be marketing. It's somebody that you'll get later on, and it may turn out that you have different people as the business progresses. Your first marketing person might be more of a growth hacker, and then it might be somebody to run a small team, and then it might be the person from Procter and Gamble that runs a team of 50 or whatever it might be. So I think the marketing one is more of a hired role rather than a founder role.
But I suppose if you distill your model down to even the kind of the essence, what I'll say, usually you could have actually a business founder and a technical founder. I mean, that's the other variant. I see that, a lot of these, I wouldn't call them dating nights, but there's a technical founder trying to find a business founder because they see that that's been the kind of both sides of the coin.
And I think if you want to get it down to 2 points, then I think that is exactly it. And I think what's interesting is when you find a sole founder startup, if it's a technical person, they're often really, really good at building stuff. But it turns out they build stuff that nobody wants. They build stuff because they love it, or they haven't been able to pitch to investors, or they haven't been able to create a website that articulates why anyone would want, as opposed to how their insanely clever blockchain technology, operates. It's like, okay, but why do I want it? If you find the business person, you may find, for example, the doctor that's got a medical problem to solve, but they can't articulate to a team how to build it. Right. And they end up wasting a few rounds of not only funding, but years of development as they build the wrong thing they might outsource because they don't know how to build a tech team. And then the outsourced one isn't right. And then they tell the tech team such a complicated list of things that they want that they can never get started. So to have the two parts of it, and maybe the third, to make sure that you're actually focused on creating a viable business. Otherwise, people can, and the reason I had the third person is I think people can easily drink too much TechCrunch Kool-Aid. Right. And you see the stories of, success is raising more money, but actually success is really ultimately not raising money. Raising money is the failure to not have to raise money. So although I'm in the fundraising business, so if you can figure out how to get revenue, get to cash flow positive, and build a business based on ideally paying customers that fuels the business. And I think that's where the revenue and running a tight operation mindset comes in. Otherwise, founders, and I've been there and done that, will easily think that success is raising lots of money, spending lots of money, which is a lot of fun and great, and you get pool tables and everything. But after some months have gone by, you see the cash dwindling rapidly and a lot of mouths to feed, and then it becomes very stressful.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's that thing about, I suppose the question for a lot of founders these days is what is the capitalization? What are they actually self-funding it? Have they actually taken any money at all? And what's the burn rate that they really need to do? Because I think the thing you were alluding to is that there's that situation where people have become overcapitalized, and then, to my mind, managing the stakeholders becomes incredibly challenging if you haven't got a robust business model. It becomes quite a roller coaster ride, so to speak.
Right. So, and we've all been there. So the my data shows that founders invest a median of £26,000 of their own money into the business at the beginning, because no one will invest on a PowerPoint. Mm-hmm. So, ideally, you can keep funding the business because you then own 100% of it. You don't have investors to deal with and so on. But when does it make sense to raise? And I think it makes sense to raise when broadly, your ability to fund it yourself is limiting the growth of the business.
Yeah.
So at SeedLegals, my business partner and I were funding it, and you can put in a couple of £1,000 a month, and then it starts hitting £10,000 a month, and at some point your wife's going to notice, a small amount of money going out. But it's okay, great. Between us, we can cover £10,000 a month. But what if we now want it to be £20,000 a month? Well, pretty soon it becomes an expensive hobby. So at some, as my business partner reminds me, you can't own more than 100% of your own business. So putting more of your own money into it doesn't help you. You've still got 100% of the capital. So at some point when essentially the tipping point is when you've built enough that you can reach a valuation that helps you raise the amount you need at about a 15% dilution. Right. That is the point to go fundraise. Or close your round. Before that.
Just on your money that you said you were putting in, I remember a time after I left Tesco myself and I was in Silicon Valley, and all I can say is somebody said to me, who was very close to me, said, "So your pay slips? Are you getting your pay slips now? I haven't seen any pay slips." I'm not getting pay slips anymore. Because you kind of like you've invested money into a company and you are not drawing money out of it. You pay engineers, and it's a different economic model. It's a different play. Yeah, but some people obviously are not used to that model. Yeah,
that's right. So there are two things to think about. One is you won't be earning, and two, you'll actually likely having to be spending quite a lot of your money until you raise investment. So ironically, the best time to be a founder is when you've had an exit of a previous startup that gave you a bit of cash that you can now use for the 6 months or whatever it is, or 12 even, that before you raise your first round.
Yeah, I mean, in the market today, then, are you generally seeing? I mean, obviously we're now in 2021. Obviously last year was kind of fairly woohoo. Are you seeing kind of an uplift in interest? Are you seeing an increased demand in people jumping into this kind of world?
So the answer is yes. And actually, I periodically look at our data, and I've seen that actually since the launch of SeedLegals, the number of funding rounds opened month on month has been increasing, in fact, slightly exponentially. Okay. And it didn't change enormously over, surprisingly, the last year. And the last weeks have been records. In fact, every week has essentially been a record, other than Christmas, when nobody does anything over Christmas. But so that's been going up. And so, any suggestion that the UK startup economy isn't in great health is not borne out by that data. Okay. But actually, this morning I looked at another set of data we've got, which is the number of SEIS, EIS, advanced assurance applications. So for those who aren't aware, SEIS and EIS let UK investors get a tax deduction on their investment. You can write off, or you can deduct 50% of your investment amount in a startup up to £100,000 a year for an investor, and up to $1 million, you can write off 30% of your investment under the EIS scheme. So UK funding rounds, as a result, early stage rounds are 80% fueled by angel investors. And it works really brilliantly. But what's quite interesting is I just happened to look at our data, which I haven't looked at for a few weeks. And boy, is it up. Starting in January, it's a huge jump. So over the past years, it's been growing nicely on SeedLegals. And then it dipped quite a lot during COVID times, but it's back with a vengeance.
Oh, wow.
And these advanced assurance applications, this is where companies write to HMRC ahead of a funding round to ask if they'll qualify so they can go back to investors. So in a sense, it's a leading indicator, probably a 2 or 3 month leading indicator of funding rounds going to. Exactly. And that is really back. So I'm actually hugely impressed. And it also means, if you are looking to raise investment or you are an investor, don't procrastinate, because procrastination just gets you nowhere as a founder. It means your competitors are building the thing of your dreams and you're burning money every month. And as an investor, if you're holding off, you're just not getting a play.
You're just not in the market.
Exactly. Yeah. Other people are doing the best deals because you're not.
Interesting. So it sounds like there's, that's per my kind of like little green logo behind in a like nod to your kind of logo. It sounds like good green shoots then as we're coming into the end of Q1.
Yeah, I'm delighted because, when you pick up the papers, there's a lot of doom and gloom about many things, but our data suggests that startup ecosystem is in very good health.
And are you seeing a difference in the kind of the backstory of founders that are getting involved in this? In the people you're coming across, is the demographics changing? Are the characteristics of experience changing? Are the age the age range changing? Is that looking to be different as well? Or are you looking at is people older founders, younger founders, or is it generally across the board?
I haven't looked at the age bit. Obviously, I'm a slightly older founder.
No, you're not. No, you're not.
But there are, there are always
brown flowing locks. Yeah, like you look like a rock star.
You'd believe from the press that founders are 20-somethings, like Zucker was when he started Facebook. But the data seems to show, not our data, but from what I've seen, that the median age of a founder is something like 45 or thereabouts. So sometimes people have had a day job for years and, there's been some passion thing burning in them. And at some point they think, okay, I've got the skills and a bit of capital that I can now support myself and be a founder. I think what has been changing. Sorry. What has been changing is, firstly, of course, thanks to COVID, some sectors are much more investable than others. So, anything that's work from home, ed tech, med tech is on a huge spike. Anything that is, work in a shared environment or a gym or a restaurant is not going so well.
So hospitality and retail kind of thing, it's been under pressure. So.
That's right. So some sectors are off the boil, and some of those founders are either just holding off or are pivoting into something else. Can you reinvent yourself for home delivery? Can you reinvent yourself in some other way your product is used? And I think that's really fascinating to see. I think the other thing is when we started SeedLegals, it was probably the first adopters were fintechs and, sort of the expected technical founders. But what I really love is that we've democratized fundraising, and people who would otherwise not have the knowledge or be afraid or not have legal fees and so on can hop on a platform, see articles and videos on how to create a pitch deck, how funding works, how to apply for your advance assurance. And we see an amazing range. In fact, with our Slack integration, as companies are created on SeedLegals, we get a Slack message. And sometimes in the middle of the night, when I have done checking Twitter, I'll look at the companies that have, jumped on and started and jump on their websites. I see the URL, and it's just amazing to see the ingenuity of humankind. I'm totally chuffed and, in admiration of the things that people think of, and also the fact that they're using SeedLegals.
I was just thinking about when you were talking about Slack message, because I had Dennis Tudor on, who's the CEO of SwissPod the other week, and he's doing like Hyperloop for Switzerland. He's building the pods for Hyperloop, and he said that he basically sleeps to the sound of Slack. It's kind of like he's like ding ding, and it just made me remind me of the remember the Monty Python film, The Life of Brian?
Yes.
With the quick, get the machine that we spent a lot of money on.
The machine goes ping.
It's to be like, quick, where's the machine that goes ping? So
yes, like, as a complete random aside, I think that Slack cluck cluck sound indicates the power of the default. So when you build a product, you should always make sure that the default is the behavior you want people to have. And that Slack sound drives me crazy. When you're on a Zoom call with a teammate and there's this clucking sound, it's like, FFS, turn the Slack sounds off. You want to write to Slack saying, why did you ever turn the sound on by default?
Well, you see what they've done is they've got a signature sound now, haven't they? They've got a signature brand, a signature sound.
So, of course, on the other side, you have created some brand awareness.
Iconic sound.
It's a brand thing that drives you crazy, but that's aside. It's a branding. So, yes.
And also, I mean, if you think about what they've done there is they've sold them a messaging platform. It's basically a messaging platform, a workflow platform for $38 billion to Salesforce. I mean, wow. I mean, how could you predict that? I mean, it's just nuts.
There are many things with very high valuations, and of course, those are the things that inspire founders to want to be there. The problem is very few exits are at that valuation. And the vast majority of startups, I think the median exit valuation is something like 20 million pounds or thereabouts, which is a nice win for founders, may or may not be a great win for investors. And that actually is quite interesting. So if it's an angel investor that's invested in at a 1 or 2 million valuation, got diluted 1 or 2 rounds, and there's a 20 million exit, that might be a 5x return on investment at the point where your bank is giving you 0% and you've got a tax deduction and your capital gains are tax-free because of SEIS and EIS. Yeah. It's a really nice win for an angel investor and a really great win for a founder. And hopefully their team have got some share options and so on as well. But if you're a VC, that might not be a good outcome. A VC needs hundreds of millions exit value to get a return on their investment. And most founders don't understand that the metrics for an angel, which is, I'd love a 3x return in a few years, is awesome. I'm just going to do this again. Whereas a VC, you tell, I've got a 3x return, they go, that was unsuccessful. So,
that was an embarrassment. Let's move on.
Exactly.
So is this phenomenon called unicorns then? What's your view on these unicorns? There seems to be more unicorns breeding.
Well, there are. Unicorn is an arbitrary number, right? $1 billion. It could have been something else. Of course, it's a nice so-called North Star to aim for, but I think it's wrong for 2 reasons. One of them is it means most founders feel personal failures that they weren't unicorns. I mean, the reality is there are 6,000 new startups a year in the UK, and there are like 3 UK unicorns a year. So statistically, you're not going to be a unicorn. But is that a problem? I mean, if you start a cheese shop, your goal is to sell enough cheese that you can pay your wages, put your kids through uni, employ people, pay their wages, help them do whatever they want. And that's good. You don't expect to be a unicorn. You expect to be a profitable cheese shop. So with startups, of course, the idea is different. With a cheese shop, you borrow some money from the bank to buy more cheese and sell more cheese. With a startup, you have a riskier proposition that often needs more capex. You don't know if it's going to work. The bank won't lend you money, so you borrow. You get equity investment. You give people a share of the business based on you giving them a multiple of their investment later, as opposed to 8% a year. But the question is, how ambitious do you need to be for it to be successful? And there, I think this unicorn thing has the first problem I mentioned, which is people feel a failure if they, aren't a unicorn. But the second thing is it might have people optimize for the wrong things.
Yeah.
And the unicorn businesses, at least in retrospect, those founders will go, yes, we want to own the entire payment space or own transport in every major city in the world. It's easy enough to say in retrospect, but when you start, such a vastly ambitious thing is almost certainly the kiss of death in your business. You never start by opening an operation in 18 cities. You work on one city. And when you figure that out, then you do the next one. You might separately in your pitch deck want to say to your investors, our goal is to be in 25 cities. But if you drink too much of this unicorn Kool-Aid, you might start trying to raise vast amounts of money, spend vast amounts of money before you've discovered what's called product market fit, and just hemorrhage money and be out of business, rather than a much more sensible organic growth strategy.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because I think that, in the last probably 3 or 4 years, the number of CEOs and founders or co-founders that come to me, I want to be a unicorn. I want to be a unicorn. But actually, the valuation metric, the one that Aileen Lee defined in 2013, is an outcome measure. It's a market valuation. It's not, doesn't mean to say that actually your strategy and your proposition is viable in the long term, is it? It's just like to your point, it's a North Star, it's a halo. They're aiming for that. They're aiming for that halo to try and have that halo effect on their head.
That's right. Well, the other thing is, I think as a founder in a VC, it's important. I've said occasionally, I'll repeat it here, that the definitions of success are different. So VC as a fund, they may in their fund invest in 10 or 20 companies, and they know that some of them will fail, some of them will just do like a 1 or 2x return on investment, and they're looking for one of them to return 50 times its investment, and that's the unicorn.
Yeah.
So for a fund, if there's a 90% chance that it won't perform and a 10% chance it will get a 50x return on investment, that's a win. But for a founder, if you go home and say, honey, there's a 1% chance we'll be a billionaire, there's a 99% chance it's going to fail, your partner is going to tell you to go get a proper job because it's lunacy. On the other hand, if you go, honey, there's a reasonable chance we'll make a few million from it after a few years of being underpaid, that might be a more productive discussion and also is more useful for you, because you don't want to have a tiny chance of a huge success. You want to have a decent chance of a decent life. And also for your team, you don't want to go, team, there's a 99% chance we're going to run out of money and you'll all be destitute. You want a team. There's a very high chance you're all going to be productively employed and we can give you some share options that will top up what we're paying you and you'll have a nice sweetener if/when we have an exit.
Yeah, but I think back to that is about managing expectations, managing message. That's kind of key to all that and landing it well.
Exactly.
Whether you're at home or in the boardroom or in the team meeting.
But it's also about designing the business accordingly, because if you're designing it to be a unicorn, you're going to place massive bets that will either fail spectacularly or maybe take off spectacularly. But if your goal is to reliably have a revenue-generating, profitable business, you'll take much smaller bets, but ones which will be more reliably delivering a success.
So I suppose the reason I asked that question was because obviously there has been a craze around that, and I suppose are you seeing now with the types of proposition that are coming through, are they more leaning towards I want to be unicorns, or they want to be a long-term sustainable social impacting, world impacting business, or is there a bit of both?
I think the vast majority of founders can keep completely separated in their head. You're reading TechCrunch and news on unicorns, and actually get on with running a proper business where you've hiring a new person, you have to pay them, and will it make payroll this month and things like that. And so you certainly want to have a big picture vision and impress that on your investors. But you also want to make sure on a daily basis you've got a wonderful team that see growing path to success each month.
still stay grounded. Yeah,
exactly. That's probably the two-word tagline. Exactly.
So in terms of your, thanks for explaining that. I think it's incredibly valuable that just to share with the audience. It's you're a fountain of knowledge, Anthony. It's great. It's great to listen to your answers and stuff like that. It's very good. In terms of your backstory, I know that you kind of quickly race through it, but I suppose in terms of your journey to get to the point now where you got with SeedLegals. One of the things I talk about is what I call peaks and valleys, and people, and I've learned through my peaks and valleys personally about you kind of get better as you get older, although still very young. So, is there any kind of stories that you would like to share with the audience about what you learned on things that went really well or things that maybe didn't go so well, but you actually learned from them? It's something that would be beneficial.
Sure, I think a couple of things. So, firstly, I'm a tech guy. My background is sitting in my bedroom as a kid at home with the soldering iron, designing circuit boards. So once upon a time when I used to
get those resistors out.
Did my Myers-Briggs test. Exactly. When I did Myers-Briggs profile, it was an INTJ, and more recently when I did it was an ENTJ. So the introvert has sort of turned more into the extrovert, and I think that's one of the personal. So the first thing is sort of the personal journey of a founder, and when you founders often, you don't get born going, I'm a founder. You start doing something else, and then you're a tech person or you're a doctor or whatever it is, and you're good at your domain. You probably work by yourself, focusing on something, but now you find that you have to reinvent yourself, and the reinventing yourself is quite an interesting, often challenging personal journey. So for me, I just love writing a document and listening to Wagner at midnight to 3 a.m. That's me. I'd prefer actually, I wouldn't say I prefer, but I'm delighted never to talk to anyone in the world, just do that. But you can't be the CEO of a growing company if you want to do that. So you have to change the way that you work, change the way, probably also, I'm sure my team probably will still tell you, micromanage a bit. So you have to learn, don't do everything yourself. Your goal is not to do things yourself, but to hire people who can do things. Even if you can do them better in the short term than they can, you should try to avoid doing that, and you should mentor them so that they can do it better. Otherwise, it's not going to scale. So thing one is, for most founders, there's this journey between your attributes as a founder when you're a 2 or 5 person company is different to a 50 person and different again to a 500 person company. And you then have to see in your journey, and you may find within your own business, some of your earliest joiners, how they reinvent themselves. Does your first CTO, who's great when they're with 3 people, will they still be right when you're 50 or 500? Or are they different people for different jobs? And either you need to not be in the business anymore, or you need to reinvent yourself. And I don't say for me whether that's a high or low, simply that it's a learning journey, as we've had different startups and different co-founders who complement you in different ways. And also you may start off, in my case, really as a CTO, and then later on go CEO. And then as CEO, you find, or as a management team in a business, you have domains of expertise. If someone were to ask me, about video streaming from my iPlayer days, or about a liquidation preference or company valuation, and now with SeedLegals hat on, I feel I can reasonably talk about it.
Yeah, it's your specialist subject. It's a bit like your mastermind. Yeah.
But then one day COVID comes along and people look to you and go, "Oh, wise one, when will we be back in the office?" And you can't.
Obi-Wan Rose.
you can't go. Fact, if I know you, and you can't go. I've no idea. Does anyone else know the answer? You have to have some leadership on it. So you don't want to bullshit, because people realize it's just bullshit. So how do you sort of tap within to find something that you can lead people on an unknown journey? And I think that's one of the other interesting things as a founder. There are all sorts of random things that come up, and how do you deal with it personally.
Which how do you deal with uncertainty? I suppose that's the thing.
Yes, and by the way, I think dealing with and thriving on uncertainty is one of the key attributes of being a founder. Because when you work in a large company, there's almost always someone else you can ask the answer, and even if you can't, it's not your problem if it doesn't work. It's like sales are not working. All right, we'll just call the sales manager and find out.
Yeah.
But one of the things in a startup is there are endless numbers of decisions you have to make each day. Yeah. Some of them are when things are not going well, you haven't got product market fit, you're burning cash, you've got 4 months cash left. Do we pivot? What do we do? If we don't make a decision, we definitely going to fail. If we make the wrong decisions, we'll fail. What do I do? Do I become a dictator and just throw the dice and make a decision myself? Do I become over democratic and throw it open to everyone else? And then the team go, our fearless leader doesn't know a thing. We left leading. So these are fascinating problems. So if you're a founder, you actually have to love dealing with those, or even if you don't love it, you have to learn to love it, like Dr. Strangelove. You have to learn to love the bomb. And so a key attribute is making decisions. And so I was actually quite intrigued. So, when Brexit surfaced, and I would see on Twitter people going, what does this mean? We don't know. Nobody knows the answer. And I'm thinking, nobody knows the answer. That has to be a business opportunity. If nobody knows the answer, then you can either start guessing, or you can create some product propositions that will tap into nobody knowing the answer, or you can have a guess at what the answer is. Yeah. So one man's problem is another man's...
some scenarios kind of thing.
Yeah, one man's problem, one is another opportunity. And by the way, I'm not having any value judgment on whether Brexit was good or bad, merely that whenever there's a perturbation on the system, Brexit, COVID, whatever the next thing will be, how can you, if not look to leverage it as an opportunity, at least not fall into the trap of, being a bit of a headless chicken? And
I was going to say, what you're saying is you don't put your hands on your ears and you go, you're like this, you just kind of try and ignore it and hope it'll go away.
That's exactly it. You might be uniquely positioned where business isn't affected, or in a lucky position where it isn't. But for the most part, you at least want to think about what you can do to maximize your opportunity in that changing world.
Interesting. Yeah, that's very good. I remember going down to the Tobacco Dock a few years ago. There was a fintech conference on, and they was obviously stating that that it's still the UK is still the most vibrant and the largest market. Is that still the same? You think? Is it still the biggest market? Are we being caught up by our European counterparts?
So when I see articles going, Amsterdam is bigger than London, does it matter actually that who's number one? What you want is you want growth and you want vibrant businesses. I don't think it's a first past the post game. It makes no difference if Beijing, London, or New York is bigger. What you want is that you have an opportunity to start a business and have a great business. So I ignore the number one, number two things, but instead look to see if in fact banks are moving their headquarters elsewhere, what's the opportunity? Maybe banks will be thinking they need to move their headquarters, but actually the EU rules make it impossible to work, and they're all going to be back here in a few years. or maybe the fact that regulated banks under MiFID or whatever are going elsewhere or something. Guess what? Start your own exchange. Do what they were doing. Fill the vacuum. Use the office space, whatever it might be. So I love how smart founders spot market opportunities and jump in. And that also means that often when regulators decide to regulate something, I think, Newton's law, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. Something's regulated. Guess what? People are just, government wants to increase some tax. Guess what? There's just going to be more corporations in Luxembourg. You want to change SEIs? Guess what? This will happen as a result. So people will look to take advantage of whatever maximizes their opportunity. And so lawmakers need to take that into account as well.
I mean, the reason I was asking that question was, I suppose, that in terms of your growth plan for what you're doing, your I think your main project is SeedLegals, I think. So, I mean, I suppose I'm not sure. Are you operating or plan to operate anywhere else in the world, or are you going to stay in the UK, or is that on the kind of horizon?
So before I tell you the answer, I'll tell you the more general problem space. So I think with a startup, you can probably divide your evolution into maybe two phases. One of them is trying to find product market fit. So you've got this idea, you're building it, you don't know if anyone really wants it, you've launched it, few people are coming. How do you get anybody to want your product and buy it?
Yeah.
But if you are lucky, work hard, fortune smiles, whatever it might be, and happen to get to that point, and you then have a growing, vibrant business, you're now left with a different problem, which is, do you not do anything and go, great, we're cash flow positive, just keep growing? Or do you think that you would focus on perfecting what you've got, or reducing your cost of operations or something? Or do you do the great, let's pick some random other things to do? And how big a next bet do you place? If you place a giant bet, that's the unicorn bet, but you can break everything. If you bet we're going to launch in the US and raised 50 million to launch, that could be a disastrous thing to do. On the other hand, if you don't place any bets, for sure, one day you'll wake up and see someone else has eaten your market and out-disrupted you.
Yeah.
So what are the right size bets to place? And I think that's intriguing, because if you do have a growing business, it's quite easy to be going, all right, let's just improve what we've got, and take your eye off the big picture. And so you often see that with banks and so on. They're so busy immersed in their daily operations, they don't notice that there are challenger banks building new things. And actually, the reason they let the challenger banks in is because they just didn't make a halfway decent app. Their app is so terrible. All they need to do out of the billions they're making each year is spend a few million on a better app team to, for example,
the stuff that touches the customer. Yeah,
exactly. Little things like, your reference, when you type in the transaction reference and it limits it to 8 digits, you go, what lunacy is this? No wonder people are going to your challenger bank. Just make a bigger, let me enter the thing that I can use as a reference. It's not rocket science. Or don't let me limit to 100 days of history I can go for my transactions. What idiocy is this? Of course, you're going to leave the door open to someone else. So what you need to do is innovate in the zone that you're in, to have an increasingly good product. But then you also need to place other bets. Otherwise, you are going to be limited to the size of the market. So then with that in mind, what am I doing? Well, some things I'll tell you, and some things will remain a mystery for later.
Lock and key. Yeah. Okay.
But I think but clearly, one of our goals is that in the same way TransferWise brings you borderless banking, we would love to bring you borderless legals. So just like banks are local, people in Italy with their banks and people here, imagine there was a platform that you could just send money anywhere. Well, likewise with legals, German law and French law is all different. But when you do an investment, the things you want are always the same. I want a board seat. This is the valuation. Correct. I want a drag along or a tag along and the ability to sell. So why is that not normalized? Why is there not a platform that no matter which country the startup is in, when you invest, you see in your language, normalized terms in the same interface, your portfolio, and that's on our roadmap. So we're already in France and we're in Ireland. Those are going very nicely. And later this year, you'll see some more countries.
So you'd be like planting all these flags.
Exactly. Yes. Yeah. And I must say that's one of the most difficult things I find with COVID, which is business has grown very nicely, maybe because people are watching their money more carefully and not going to law firms, or maybe because our platform being online and 24/7 is just perfect when you're working from home. I was never going to go and visit a law firm in Holborn. Guess what? There's a platform. But what I think is more difficult is launching in other countries, because I've wanted to visit our French team for the last year, but just can't. We used to do events, but these days they're online. But, we're at Station F in Paris, which is 1,000 startups in the building. But, for quite a few months, there were 0 startups in the building. And now there are a few, but, they don't want you within 2 meters of them. So, so that becomes more difficult, the international piece, I think.
Yeah, it's interesting because I was involved in a couple of startups last year in the US, and one was in Hawaii, and which is quite nice. And we didn't physically go there, but actually we saw into the guys in Hawaii. But they were recommending certain platforms in different other countries for incorporation and managing all that piece. I think that some of the stuff that you cover. So it definitely seems to be a phenomenon. But what I found was that those companies were just in their country, so they were just US centric. So it is that kind of it is a global problem. As you start to scale, and if you look at this classic Ansoff matrix, where the customers and where the product mix are, or even if you put a country dimension there, if you want to grow the business, then you've got to have those foundations set up properly, and that kind of seems to fit very nicely with what you do. So it's good to hear that the SeedLegals emblem will be placing itself in different countries in the future.
I hope so. Working on it.
That's good. That's great. It's exporting, because I suppose you incorporated in the UK, didn't you? It was founded in the UK.
Exactly. Yes. Which, by the way, is and remains a fab place. You can incorporate on Companies House in about 5 minutes for £12, maybe 30 minutes for £12. Directors can be anywhere in the world. You get tax incentives for your investors, R&D cash back for the company. The cost of doing business the overhead of doing business is small. So whenever I read about companies moving to Luxembourg, Estonia, Europe, I think, why? There's zero friction in my operating a business on a day-to-day basis. The goal is to focus on the key things that will grow your business. Why would I want to futz around and spend weeks or months changing my business incorporation? Actually, I should be spending all of that building a new product. So I think when I see tweets about I'm going to move my company elsewhere, unless there's a really good reason, I think the founders are focused on the wrong thing. The goal is to spend 100% of your time on product market fit and building something that consumers love, and 0% of your time futzing around with, legals, incorporation, fundraising, and anything else.
But I think my experience, you also sometimes get influenced by the investors as well. So sometimes the investors influence where that change could happen. Maybe there's, a certain jurisdiction where they want to be operating in. But I think there's also this kind of bit like back to the unicorn discussion. It's a bit like this cachet with sometimes about they have to be in a certain jurisdiction, certain state, certain, blah, blah, blah. It seems to be a bit of a dimension.
So that's a great point. I think that investors like to invest in companies in their own jurisdiction. And, there are the obvious reasons. They understand the law. They can go sue them if something doesn't go right. They can read the company's deal docs and understand what it means. They've done rounds in that jurisdiction before. So when they see another articles or shareholders agreement, they just jump to Section 5, which is liquidation. You understand, you know where to go. It's like jumping in a familiar car.
Yeah.
You can go meet the founders. You can see their team. You can give them, you understand the market that they're in. So founders are always looking for investors generally in their own territory, and investors are looking for companies there. So that's another reason why, certainly if you're in the UK, which has got a giant investment community, to be incorporated here, there is a step further, which is you can flip to Delaware, where, if you have a Y Combinator and you manage to get into YC, then there's called the Delaware flip, and companies may go. But generally, companies across Europe would migrate to the UK, and ultimately companies in the UK, when they outgrow that, if they do, may flip to the US.
Reinvent themselves, allegedly.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes. So in terms of just switching topics slightly, that was very useful, is about the kind of, I suppose, Matt, your take on the future of tech, given you are or were in your heritage, as you said, a more of a technical guy. And I think you were the CTO of iPlayer. Is that right?
Yeah, yeah.
That's such a cool bit on your CV, isn't it? It's such a cool bit. Legend. Hashtag
Thank
legend.
You.
That's cool.
Thank you.
I mean, I actually looked after the BBC when I was working for SAP, when John Smith was he wasn't the director general, he wasn't the DG, but he was the finance director.
Right.
It was very entertaining times then. It was he was trying to get control of BBC Resources, who were quite a challenging organisation to get his arms around.
Yes. So for those who don't know the internals of BBC politics, getting hold of BBC Resources would be roughly like the Battle of the Somme, something like that, but really quite a lot more bloody, I think. Yeah.
Yeah, it was. They had their own rule book, basically. I think that was probably the best way to describe it. No, but it was very pleasant times spending time in the BBC. It was there's so many characters there, and the stories and the presentations by producers explaining how they would do things in the Amazon and various things like that. It's just hilarious. It's legendary. And then we're saying, can we implement this procurement and accounting software? Oh no, we don't really want to do that. Anyway, that's another story.
So technology. So my take on technology, I'm really the rampant technologist. So I think technology is the solution to all problems. But I'm amazed when I think just as a macro starting point, people don't look far back enough in history to form a judgment on. They're often very short-termist, and almost everything that we see, if you look back, so the way wearing face masks in COVID. Well, guess what? Back in the flu of 1918 or whatever, they were exactly the same things. Almost all things, we can just look back and see how they were done before. But when it comes to technology, people might take an extremely short-term view. Well, social media is, leading to the rise of, fringe opinions. Look back when there was only like one source of news in your village. And if that person was crazy and told you that all women were witches or something like that, the entire town, you're way better off having multiple sources of information a click away. If you choose to have some sub-segment, that's a separate issue to resolve. But I mean, you just look at the increase in lifetime, the health conditions. You look back a century ago, what the life expectancy was, 40s or whatever. Most people lost most of their teeth. Houses didn't have electricity or heating. The bathroom was a squalid thing out the back. Life was awful. Why would you possibly want to that? But technology, people go, well, we've reached a good point now. We can stop. But that's not the case. You'll look back later on and see that evolution is exactly the same as it was previously, as there will be in the future.
But I mean, have you got any predictions? I mean, we're now in a new decade. Any things you think, what's going to happen by 2025, 2030, 2050? Any view on that? Do you think we're going to be living with Elon on Mars?
I'm not going to, because unfortunately I can, in this case, have imagination no better than anyone else's, and they'll all be trite. So I won't go on point with anything, because you'd guess as well as I could.
I reckon by 2025, SeedLegals will be global. We'll be operating in 50 countries. That's my prediction.
I mean, that's not a global forecast, but a local one. I'll go with that.
Global.
All right.
So I suppose in terms of you personally, I mean, what are you most excited about these days?
What am I most excited about? I like how we are helping a new generation of startups to take the friction out of a lot of things they need to build their businesses. And I think we're enabling a lot of the startup economy to flourish in a way that hasn't been possible before. If you're a startup founder, you may now be in a position where you can do something that just wasn't possible. And we playing our small part in that, and that is really rewarding.
That's fantastic. I mean, I think it's that sleep at night factor, I think, because it really is, I think, that the legal side is something that people worry about. But
it's not so much the legal side, it's the just what do I do? And so
it's the how and the what and the why. I think it's especially for technical founders, I think, who haven't got that, maybe that more broader business acumen, that it is definitely something to get them in more comfortable, because they realize I've been involved in a couple of listings on the stock market, and even just the fiduciary commitments for that, is pretty onerous.
I think that what often happens is that whether it be investors or competitors or customers look at some new technology, they look at the perceived immediate way it's going to change things. But actually, its real effect will be much later and quite different. So on SeedLegals, our goal first is to help you close a funding round. And then our goal afterwards is to help you not close a funding round. So to transform the fact that previously you had to do a funding round, and now you can do a rolling close round. You can raise before a round, then you can have a round, then you can top up afterwards. So when people think about SeedLegals and legals, our goal initially was to take the problem of I want to do a funding round and more efficiently do it. But actually, that was just the start. Once you've mechanized the process and someone can get onto your platform at midnight and in a few clicks create an agreement to top up a round and raise another 20K, people will start doing that. And so actually what's interesting is we've transformed the way startups in the UK actually go about fundraising. And there's almost as much raised outside of a round as in a round. And startups no longer have to do this 12 to 18 months, go big or go bust.
Right.
I couldn't do a new round. They can raise, top up a bit more, meet somebody in an event, wants to raise, send out an investment proposal.
It's like continuous capitalization.
Exactly. And I think that's really interesting. So when people go, are you, offering legals? Like, dude, that was like so 2018. the world has moved on.
Last decade.
Exactly. And the world will move on again.
We're very nouveau riche now. We're nouveau riche startup now. Yeah.
That's right. So, I mean, if I think about the platform we've built today, I'm enormously chuffed that instead of spending days futzing around, marking up a Word document, you input the terms you would like, and the platform builds it. But actually, it's also a bit of a fail. Why do I have to ask people a lot of questions about, how many board seats do you want your investors to get, and should they get investor consent? What about if I could go the next step and go, tell me about your investors. How much you're looking to raise? Great. I know the answers based on that. Here's what you're probably going to end up with. And I've pre-filled all the things. Of course, review
propose and predict what you should set it up as.
Exactly. Right. And that's what we work on now. We call it the thermometer. So it will predict and show you what's market and what most people choose.
Okay.
Yeah. So it will show you what people in that size funding round generally the histogram of what people choose to help you pick wisely and know which things you could push for, which things you can push back on, and so on. So
actually, it helps you to flex the term sheet then, basically, get the optimized term sheet.
Exactly. Exactly. So legals are a byproduct, but actually the legals in due course, nobody will care about it. It will be on the blockchain and a smart contract. I mean, let's not get ahead of ourselves, but what you and I want to do is we want to agree some deal terms. We want to agree that in a few sentences in plain English, and then trust that something builds whatever it is to back up.
Builds a foundation between that. Yeah.
Exactly, yes.
Are you going to have to get Arnold Schwarzenegger to advertise that? The thermometer. The thermometer powered by Anthony Rose. I'll be back. If you don't pay your dues, pay your subscription.
I'll sign online. Yes. Okay.
This is us trying to do pathetic Austrian accents.
Yeah, we might edit this bit out.
Yes. No, that's fantastic. So I suppose the final thing I was going to ask you about was about your advice to founders I know you've given a load of value today about what you've explained through the episode today. But I suppose if you were going to summarize it into a few points, what would be the kind of takeaways that you would want to share with the people that are listening to this show?
So, number one, in no particular order, I suppose it's a marathon, not a sprint. So founders might go, well, I'm going to do something for a couple of years, but actually the median time to an exit is something like 5 to 7 years. So you should think about, in the optimal case, when things go well, you're going to be growing a team, growing yourself, building something and you should plan accordingly that you should not be burnt out by overdoing things early on. You might still have, a slightly optimistic, presentation to your spouse saying that it will only be for a year or two until an exit, but actually, it's more like 5 to 7 years. And secondly, that you have to love making decisions. If you can't make decisions, you should get some other day job. Then I think the next one is you should surround yourself with the right co-founders that complement your skills, because the problem is that there are many things you have to make decisions on. And some of them you feel confident that you can. Some of them you just don't know the answer. And some of them it's really a shared pact. Should I launch in the US? Well, there's some pros and there's some cons. There's no clear right and wrong answer. But in a few years' time, whether we did A or B or did neither, or failed to make a decision, will have been right or wrong retrospectively. So how do you have a confidant? It can't be your entire team. You can't go, hey, team, I don't know what to do here, because they're going to go, can we get a new leader, please? So you need to have a confidant that you can brainstorm and have a shared risk, shared reward with. And then I think, for me personally, I think it's super important to obsess about your customers and building something that customers want, because too often founders think success is building stuff, but actually the real problem is having people want what you've built. Yeah. And I can just see on a website where websites explain this is a blockchain and this, nowhere is it showing why I want this. So if you can't show people why they want it, then you'll be forever building things and searching for customers.
Yeah, be on the forever journey for product market fit.
Exactly.
Fantastic. Well, thank you very much for today's show. For today's episode, should I say. It's been a fantastic episode. I was going to say to you, if anybody wants to know more about what you do and how to get hold of you and your team, what's the best way of doing that?
Well, firstly, head over to SeedLegals.com. If you go to the resources section, there are lots of articles, some of them data-driven, some of them videos. If you want to find out how to do a pitch deck, you can Google SeedLegals Pitch Deck Clinic. If you want to get in touch with us or get any questions, hit the chat bubble. And if you want to get in touch with me, Anthony at SeedLegals.com, or just hit me up on LinkedIn, Anthony Rose.
Fantastic. Or talk to Lawrence, your bot.
Well, Lawrence, is great for the common questions. I'm better, I think, until Lawrence gets upgraded.
Well, no, it's just that if you're not available, then Lawrence can help out. You see, you're your sidekick. You see, so
exactly. And my constant goal is actually to have Lawrence replace me completely. He's not there yet, but maybe with the new video series.
Don't let the wife know about that. Don't let the wife know about that. That's fantastic. Thank you very much for your time today. That's been Anthony Rose, who's CEO and co-founder of SeedLegals. And that was Andrew Turner. Yes, thank you very much. And that was Andrew Turner, founder and host of the G&T Sessions podcast. Catch you later. Bye-bye.